Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Modern Market. This is our daily show from Monday to Friday at 7 a.m. Eastern Time, 12 p.m. GMT, every day of the week, where we discuss all things to do with the modern market. That is the crypto market, the NFT market, and how to make a stupendous amount of money on the internet in an ideal world. Of course, I'm your host, BAYC. I'm joined by my legendary co-host, Sammy, not to be confused by our other legendary co-host today, Sam. NFT Stats is with us live on X, live on YouTube too. If you're not watching us on YouTube, you got to check this setup out today. It's pretty comical, it's pretty funny, it's pretty enjoyable. Sam is sitting. I'll let Sam describe where he's sitting. Sam, how are you doing? Welcome to the show, live for the first time. How do you find the setup?
Dude, this setup is crazy. I mean, the way that BAYC travels is a sight to be seen, but I'm not surprised because he's a disciplined guy and he's bringing that to the podcasting game. I was sitting on a swing, which was super awesome, but the vibe was a little bit off. So now I'm just on a stool, which isn't quite as awesome.
Yeah, it would have been really, really good if you could have done the whole show from the swing very nonchalantly. That's good stuff. Really, really glad to have you with us. This is fun. It's fun doing the IRL stuff, man. And also, it's the first time we've met in real life. First time we've met a bunch of people in real life. How have you found it in general in Dubai? Just, getting to meet people again for the first time or the second?
Yeah, the thing that always surprises me is actually how much you already know people well enough through seeing them on calls so much and through just getting to know people in the way we get to know people online that like when you meet, it doesn't really throw that many surprises. It's kind of like, all right, this is basically exactly what I expected,
Yeah, it's so funny. I know exactly what you mean. Like, I guess that's one of the advantages of doing media, where you just get to know the people. Well, you feel like you get to know them pretty well, and they're basically the same person that you think that they are because you see them every day. So that's pretty helpful. Sammy, you are stuck in London. You said the weather's nice. That's good for you there. How are you feeling missing out on some of this stuff? Yeah, and what's your experience of the IRL connections as well?
Well, now that the weather's picked up in Dubai, I'm getting serious FOMO. I think when I saw the storm the other day, I was like, okay, I'm glad I'm not there. But now it's sunny over there. I'm kind of feeling a bit of FOMO. But yeah, I think the IRL stuff's great. Like I've been to Paris, Miami. I think I went to Amsterdam for Breakpoint and so many different conferences. But it's just great to connect with those people in real life. You can build that bond that I don't think that you kind of make over the internet. I think there's something to that tangible feel. So yeah, it's good.
Yeah,
serious FOMO.
Serious FOMO. Well, don't feel too much FOMO because there's still significant floods here, and it's been pretty difficult to get around. Sam, how have you found the flooding situation in general in Dubai?
I mean, it's absurd. Like we were lucky that we got here before it and we were in our hotel the day of, but there are like real stories of people spending 12 hours in cars, people walking with their suitcases on their head when the water was up to their like midsection. This city is just not equipped for this kind of flood. And it's still just to get here from push the order Uber button to arrival. For me to get to a place like this is an hour and a half. So I would, Sammy, save that FOMO for something else, man.
Yeah, it might look good on the photos, but I think some people had a really difficult experience with it, from in different ways, basically from journeys from the hotel to other places, from the airport to other places as well. But in general, things are picking up. The interesting thing, before we get into the headlines, ladies and gentlemen, because we will get there in a second, but I haven't actually been able to leave the hotel the last couple of days, not because things haven't started clearing up, but because people just keep visiting this hotel. So I've been stuck in the hotel, but as you said, having a really good time meeting people for the first time. But guys, let's get into the headlines. As always, it's in the snapshot, which I hope is pinned up top. It is. Thank you, Sammy, for that. Get you up to speed with everything that's been happening in the past 24 hours. As always, if you do find it brings you some value today, please do give it a like. Let's do this, starting with the first headline, which is Yuga Labs selling the heavy metal collection and the Legends of the Mara IP to Faraway. And as a consequence, a lot of the Yuga Assets pumped. Very keen to have a discussion on this as we get into the show. Just for some context first, Faraway is acquiring, this is the message from Faraway, Faraway is acquiring Heavy Metal and Legends of the Mara. We're incredibly excited to take this IP to new heights by building on the strong foundation that Yuga has created. That starts by rewarding the community. Keep an eye on your metadata today. So interesting to see what Faraway do with that. Yuga Labs Gaming, in addition, said that Faraway asked us to burn 4,295 heavy metal NFTs held by Yuga Labs, ensuring a permanent supply reduction. This is now complete. So we'll see what we make of this. I saw some community sentiment. The asset's obviously up in price, which I guess will make people happy, but we'll want to talk about that in a little bit. Number two, this was pretty big news that was very, very hot off the press. Binance launches Megadrop, a token platform with airdrops and quests. Binance is launching Binance Megadrop, a new token launch platform with airdrops and Web3 quests where users can subscribe BNB to locked products and or complete tasks in their Web3 wallet for early access to rewards from selected Web3 projects before their tokens are listed on Binance Exchange. I think that's a really, really big piece of news. I think a lot of people are aiming for this kind of Launchpad style product at the moment. I think there's a lot of money to be made there. I want to talk about that in just a little bit. And finally, WorldCoin announces WorldChain and Ethereum L2 for its 5 million verified users. If in doubt, make an L2. Seems to be the way people are going at the moment. Some top sales from around the space. We had a Bitcoin Punk selling for 2.69 BTC, a CryptoPunk Clown Eyes selling for 40 ETH with that CryptoPunk floor kind of definitely decreasing towards under 40 ETH for the first time in a while. So those are the top sales in terms of crypto price action. Let's see what we have. We've got Bitcoin at 62, just fairly flat. Ethereum at 3K, Solana at 135. Feels like it's been a bit calm on the crypto side of things most recently. So that's where we are there. Sammy, though, that is the price action. Those are the headlines. Is there anything catching your attention before we get into the bigger headlines?
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit of a sea of green with ETH NFTs today. I think there's been a bit of a bounce with the BAYC and Macy. I know Cyrus tweeted that he'd been picking up Macy's for, I think he's got 20 or 30 now. And I think it's just interesting to see that. I think he made the comment that there's lack of leverage as well. So those big holders that would typically lend against them don't have many. So in terms of a risk return, then that seemed to be a logical play. And in the traditional media as well, you see it, them commenting on Bored Apes down significantly back to like 2022, 2021. So to me, that's a buy signal. If you remember the Rolling Stone stuff with your NFTs are completely worthless was the previous bottom. So it'd be curious to see if that kind of acts as a local bottom as well.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned the media. They seem to always time the bottom in that respect. Sam, what are your thoughts on green across the board in the market here? Looking at the chart on Mintify, I've got Mutant 8s up 16% back to 2 ETH. Bored Apes up 13% back to 12.1. Even other things have pumped as a consequence. I don't know if they're related, but we've got D-Gods at 1.4 up 6%. Milady's up 6% to 4.5. Pudgy Penguins fairly flat at 10.3. But as you said, we're scrolling through here. Everything seems to be up on a bullish day. Do you think this is connected to the Yuga Lab stuff, or is it just, oversold?
I mean, look, this is one of those situations where I'd be like Bored Apes rallying and I'd post a chart anywhere from 3 months to 1 year, and it would look like a down only chart with like a hook at the end that you may or may not even be able to notice. When something's gone from 80 to 40 to 10 and then it goes up to like 11, it's like hard to get too excited. I don't read too deep into this. Everyone knows my views. I think that like in the farming world, it's very hard for anything to do anything other than kind of trend lower. So but you do always get little rallies here and there. And, obviously we've seen a couple projects that have had a bit more sustained rallies, but overall, like one of the things I remember from my show when I was doing a daily show, I really tried to get to know like what I was talking about quite well ahead of time, but I got to a point where I literally just gave up on the Yuga ecosystem. I was like, I can't even pretend to have any idea what the fuck they're talking about with heavy metal and all these other assets that they created out of nowhere. So I think like this move was them just acknowledging that they created something way outside their expertise, way above their pay grade. And you see this all the time where like people will come up with NFTs for a potential game and have 100 different attributes, and their imagination goes wild when imagining what it could be, but then it's impossible to execute against. So, you know, I think that this move is basically them just kind of coming out and saying, yep, like this was way outside. Like our eyes were bigger than our stomach when it came to designing like what this ecosystem could turn into.
Interesting stuff. Like, I think a lot of people probably agree with you. It might be worth just getting into that kind of conversation right away. That is one of the headlines today. So just to set it up for people before we get into some like opinions from the timeline, let's share the article, which was kind of providing the information. These articles are always so long. I wish they were sometimes just a bit shorter, telling you what exactly happened. But for the context for people, they said today marks a milestone for our IP as we announced that Faraway is acquiring Legends of the Mara and Heavy Metal. We've been in talks with Faraway for over a year now. That's pretty interesting. We've been in talks with Faraway for over a year now about the possibility of using our IP for games. We started with a conversation around Legends of the Mara, which manifested the deeper gaming experience for Legends of the Mara. From there, we transitioned into a conversation around Dookie Dash as the mechanism to bring new users into Yuga's interoperable gaming system, as well as the future plans for Heavy Metal. It became clear from the discussions that these IPs would accelerate under Faraway's stewardship. By placing these gaming native brands under a company with true gaming DNA, they will have a more focused strategy around gaming-related activations, with dedicated resources to make them to realize their full potential. Faraway has a proven track record and an exciting vision that aligns with what we've always wanted to see realized for both of these collections. There's a few more details here. I'm going to digest them a bit, but I'm going to stop there for a second. Let's go to Sammy first. A couple of bits that stand up to me, Sammy, is that they've said they've been in discussions for a long time, but they've kind of suggesting that it was only up until maybe later in the discussions that they started to consider like moving the IP on in terms of its stewardship. They've very much noted that placing these gaming native brands under a company with true gaming DNA sounds like an admission that Yuga Labs itself is not necessarily got true gaming DNA. What are your thoughts on that kind of admission, the move in stewardship, and like what could be next for Yuga Labs, who are, you know, what is their true DNA if it's not gaming?
I think, yeah, I mean, I'd never really heard of Faraway Gaming prior to this announcement. I don't know how big they are. I think I had a quick look, and they raised sort of 20 million Series A back in 2021, and they've got some involvement with Solana and various blockchain initiatives. So it'd be interesting to see if it stays on ETH or whether it moves over. I do think that if from the admission side, I do think that if you go deep into the gaming ecosystem and you don't necessarily have the expertise and you try and acquire them, it makes sense to try and outsource it or sell it off to someone who can. So I think it's been obvious on the timeline that people are clicking buttons with no real end game as to where is this going. I think the announcements have been fairly it's been kept under wraps, and I've seen a lot of complaints on the timeline about, okay, well, we're doing this, but what are we doing this for? So it'd be interesting to see if you have this like lore building and storytelling from Faraway that kind of gives the gamers or the players within the ecosystem what they're looking for, and hopefully it rallies. But I think the burning of 4,000 NFTs, kind of cutting the supply, makes sense as well. Like I think there's been a huge dilution, and there's always a concern of like that dilution hitting the wider Yuga ecosystem. So maybe carving that off is quite a smart play. But yeah, I don't know how much they've acquired it for, or what the actual transaction was, whether it was just literally like, okay, this is a liability, let's carve it off, you guys can run it, let's keep the community happy. But I'd be interested to find out what that is.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, I definitely resonate with that. Like you mentioned a few things there, like about them being lost, like people not really knowing why they're clicking the buttons. I think that's definitely been like a sentiment that's been expressed. I wonder how that's necessarily going to change. And wondering like where the connection kind of continues on, because I guess they're no longer Yuga Assets. Does that mean all the people who hold them are no longer interested? Do they still want to play the game? That's one of the things I'm kind of wondering. Sam, would love to hear your thoughts just generally on that, but also kind of looking forward for like the future of these assets, the future for the holders. What are your thoughts here?
One of the things that occurs to me now is that they did not sell off other side, and I think that like selling off other deeds, so they sold these pieces that connect to other deeds, but they didn't sell other deeds. I think that would have been just too much of an admission. It just would have been going too far on the mea culpa scale. But at the same time, like, we have, if they're not a true gaming company and they're selling this to a gaming company, well, you have 100,000 other deeds that have like hundreds of traits, different weather patterns, different sediments, different goo types. You have like, that's supposed to mean something, and like no progress. You have a big old beautiful map with where all these other things are, but like kind of no they're there yet. So I think there's a big question, or to me at least, around like, then you got all these other assets. You got big move there, but you got all these other assets that have other deed in the title that you are giving away. Like, I don't know. I think that there are still a fair bit of question marks around other side in general. I just, that was like a multi-$100 million raise. There's supposed to be 100,000 more coming. I think like just saying, we've sold this to a company you haven't heard of, like, would have been just too much.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really good point to bring up other side, which interestingly for people who are watching in, I'm just sharing the other deed price action, which has pumped 24% on the end of this news. So as Sam was like kind of elaborating on his thoughts, I was thinking, okay, the reasonable reaction to this news, if people are now wondering, is gaming in their DNA, would be, okay, people might be worried about this because that's like, it's not, they're admitting it's not in their lane. So maybe this would have gone the other direction, but clearly not. Sam, can you have any thoughts on the price action here? What are people thinking?
I mean, 24%. Hold on, was like doesn't exactly mean what it used to. Going from 0.14 ETH to 0.18 ETH isn't, is not the same move as what a 24% move would mean, even for mutant apes. But yeah, everything had a little pop. Is this like literally like thousands of people being like, yes, I believe in other deed now? Like, I don't know. I just think when the whole market rallies, when all Yuga assets rally because people think they'll be more focused, it's not surprising that other deed goes from 0.14 to 0.18. But I'm not gonna, and the way this market is that when something gets momentum, then the other deed is a leverageable Blur project. Like, I don't know. I wouldn't say that surprises me relative to like the broader tape that we have here.
Interesting stuff. I want to share some other takes from the timeline. I picked this one because I think it kind of broadly summarized what I felt people were communicating. Not saying everyone thought this, but this is from King Blackboard. Said Yuga selling off their gaming arm today was wise. The feeling is wise and bullish. Focus needs to be on the Bored Ape Yacht Club, specifically on providing value and speculation hype for their club membership tokens, which is the BAYC and MAYC. Now would be perfect time to tease out an upcoming runes airdrop for holders. Okay, I didn't read that part before. That's new to me. Bored Ape rare rune extra token allocation. Okay, I didn't know that he'd also written that. I'd read the first part first. That would be interesting, but I think the broader sentiment, which is what I was trying to communicate, was that yes, people think it's better in order to focus on the club. But my question to Sammy first, and would love to hear Sam's thoughts on this too, is what does that practically mean, Sammy? Like in this space where everyone, frankly, has found it hard to continue to drive value to these tokens, what does it mean that, okay, fine, if it isn't gaming that Yuga are going to be focused on, what is the thing that they are focused on when it comes to this? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I get the whole focus thing. It makes sense. Like, you divest part of your business because it's not your core value proposition. I think they're just trying to get back to the roots of having Bored Apes and this club membership, this exclusivity, to try and drive that value back to holders. I don't know if like necessarily launching a rune is a wise choice, because if the halvening comes and runes don't don't hit, then I think it's an even bigger problem that they have, because then they have more assets that they're trying to manage. But
Yes,
I
agree
get this guy's point. I just don't think runes are the answer. But at this point, I think
Okay,
they do need to focus on the luxury side of things and trying to have that exclusivity. I think the only issue with that I had previously was you'd have these exclusive events in specific locations. It doesn't have that worldwide appeal. So whether you have sub communities that drive value to Europe or like those other areas, that's always been a problem. I think we've talked about that separately. Like, how do you get these events globally so that all holders can participate?
Okay, very fair take. But the question I have, so you were talking about driving value to holders. My question maybe for Sam is, what about value to investors? Because if you're carving out a whole aspect of the gaming proposition, which I think is what allowed people to raise such huge, raise at huge valuations, the prospect of becoming, a titan in Web3 gaming would have been very, very appealing to lots of investors. If you're starting to carve that out, like, what is the reason? Like, just how would investors be feeling here, and what is the value proposition then?
Yeah, look, one of the things I learned working at Proof, and one of the reasons I joined Memeline, is just how hard it is to have this multiple stakeholder situation. Like at Proof, where you have investors, and then you have holders, and then you have other holders, and you've got another project of like the whole thing becomes a mess. And I think that Yuga a year and a half ago was focused on investors, and I think right now they're realizing, holy shit, we're actually using our only customer, we're losing our only customer. And it's like, okay, time to focus on the customer, time to get away from this. Like, we're nothing without our users here, so we need to get our users back on board. I think this task, though, as you've alluded to, is extremely difficult, because the one thing that Apes did incredibly well was build this culture that people wanted to be a part of. It was aspirational for a while. It was, they maintained mystery. They maintained anticipation every time someone on the team said something. And I'm talking 2021, 2022. Like, people fell in love with different traits. There was just this, like, I always say NFTs are like nightclubs. They get hot and then they're not hot. And when you're not hot, it is extremely hard to change that. And also, it's extremely hard to try to change that. It's one of these things that just this is the nature of Veblen goods. They have momentum, where as price goes up, they become more desirable. As price goes down, they become less desirable. This is not a value industry. So I think the task of, like, how do you become cool again is extremely difficult. So I think that was a little bit before we started getting into runes, which is like, I see sort of what they're saying, but it's just ironic in the name of, like, everyone literally talking how they have to shed assets because they have too many. I tweeted this quote from Gordon Goner today, and sorry to ramble here, but I love this quote from Gordon. It's from a NFT Now article from 2023. I think it was May, but I really respect Gordon a lot, and this stuck with me. He said, like everything, attention comes in cycles. Someone takes an unpopular thing and does something interesting and cool with it, and it gets adopted in the mainstream, and it becomes uncool again. Rinse and repeat forever. And that is the nature of this game. Like, Bored Apes were kind of, back in like the summer of 2021, Bored Apes were the response to CryptoPunks, which got elite, exclusive, and way outside of people's price range. And they all rallied as Bored Apes to be this awesome thing. They were the underdog, and they took over punks. They flipped it, and then they became kind of they became themselves the big player for everyone to go after. And one thing that I have been blown away by is the amount of venom on the feed towards Bored Apes. The amount of people who are, like, just completely celebrating their demise. I have people in my DMs just I'm like, why are you so energetic about this? They're like, the amount of, like, kind of, like, pretty mean and negative energy that it is pulling out of people has been a surprise to me. It is so aggressive. So that's just, like, one thing I've been noticing. And I'm not even an ape holder. I haven't held an ape for 18 months, but I'm just someone who was there when they were becoming big and appreciated kind of what was happening at a cultural level. So I defend them a lot, and I'm just, the negative energy is overwhelming right now.
Yeah, it's a really interesting point on just the kind of energy around and how the sentiment kind of flipped in that respect. Or maybe in some ways, people was it jealousy at the beginning when the value of that particular asset was going up so quickly and their assets were not. And then after, it's almost been the enjoyment of the decline, I think. that people have been experiencing as well, which is pretty interesting. Sharing that quote from Gordon Gunner on the screen for people who are listening in, watching in. I had a follow-up question. I think we wanted to go around the house here and speak to some people who have their hand raised. Oxy Sensei, I can see you with your hand raised. Let's go to Oxy first. Resident mutant expert, resident mutant loyalist. Oxy, how are you doing, my friend? What are your thoughts here as a mutant loyalist?
Yeah, hey, thanks for having me. Yeah, I don't know if I like that title really, to be honest, but
It's got a very military sound to it. I don't know if you like that, so apologies.
No, all good. Yeah, all good. Oh no, overall, I think it's probably a good idea, right? This is outside their lane. They bit off a little bit more than they can chew. I guess without repeating what everyone else is saying, I'm curious to see what the impacts of like the ApeCoin / I guess apparently development of Ape Chain future kind of looks when they're doing these divestitures of these gaming assets. I don't know. I kind of think it's a perfect situation where they can leverage the token that they've already launched to the initial holders and then like kind of start integrating maybe additional gaming ecosystems into their pre-existing ecosystem. So like are these games that have spun off going to be using their token? Is this a way that they can bring value back to investors and or holders that are inherently earning ApeCoin? I don't know. I'm just kind of thinking, okay, what's it mean for the broader system? Are they going to start maybe trying to do something with ApeCoin here? I don't know. Just something I was thinking about when I saw they made this move. But overall, I think it's a good move for them.
Okay. I think that's fair. I think broadly that kind of maps with the other sentiment that people have been experiencing. It's like, yes, it's a good move, but still the question mark remains, right? Like, okay, well, what is this precise focus? How exactly do you move forward? So appreciate that take. Just wanted to shout out David Horvath in the YouTube comments. If you don't know David, he's been building character and brands for years and years and years. Awesome thinker and operator in this space. He said, Bored Apes can be a top 20 character brand. Punk Drunkers meets Sanrio, and the path to achieve such is simple. David, I don't know if you're in the Twitter audience as well. Would love to hear your thoughts if you're able to jump up. Sammy, if you could just take a look to see if, David is there. I'm going to invite you as a speaker, David. I don't know if you're available, but would love to hear your perspective on this. But before we get there, Sensei, your hand was raised too. What are your thoughts here, my friend? Bullish, bearish? Should there be a runes drop? What are your thoughts?
GM friends, I'm not a Yuga holder. I'm just here to express that I'm incredibly confused. My perception of this whole dump was basically that, okay, Yuga has been trying to position itself in this gaming space as like a gaming company, and now their assets are like converging on a price point that's more appropriate for gaming assets. The people who actually care about other side can enter and be there, and now they're selling off the gaming assets, and apparently they have been for a while. So it just goes completely against my expectations of what was happening. I thought Yuga's embracing this sort of vision of itself as a gaming company. They've made it through the pain of like being hated by everyone for it, but apparently not. They're just cutting it off as a failed experiment, I guess. Yeah, very against my expectations. I don't know if anyone shared that view.
Fair enough. Sam, I think you want to come in here.
Yeah, I think one thing I see happen, and again, I worked at Proof, so I've seen it kind of on the inside a little bit as well, is I think everyone kind of had a moment where the 2022 pump was over, the FOMO pumps were over, kind of like this idea of people wanting to be part of these communities to get the PFP and go to the events, like that kind of ended, and you kind of had to say loud and clear what you were. And different, I think, Azuki, we are an anime company. I think Pudgies have done a good job with that. Proof would be like, we are the art collectors PFP. But oftentimes the wagon front ran the horse, or whatever that term is, where Yuga was like, we are a gaming company, other side first. That is what we are. But I don't think that they had built a gaming company yet. I think they were just in this moment where they had to kind of like make it clear what they were. And I think that as time went on, it was like, holy shit, like this is a lot harder than we thought. And maybe we're not even experts at it. Maybe maybe this thing that we committed to because we had to commit to something wasn't as easy as we thought, and we are way in over our heads. And I think that's kind of the moment that's going on right now. And I don't know. I mean, this is just kind of reconciling why you might be confused by why like me having been on the inside of a company that went through a similar process, I actually am not surprised or confused. I just think those statements were big statements in a time where you had to make a statement, but the reality of that statement is way outside the pay grade of what it takes to say it.
Yeah, interesting perspectives there. I can see Frank in the audience as well. Would love to hear your thoughts, Frank, if you're able to join us, specifically to do with like what the focus could be now. And I think that's one of the key questions. Obviously, DGods has been attempting to like really build the club aspect and create a special place online for people to kind of congregate and be together. And that seems to be one of the things that that when people talk about the club, that's the feeling that they want to try to inspire. I would love to hear your thoughts if you're available to. We've got you up on stage. Frank, welcome to the stage, my friend. Glad to have you with us. What are your thoughts here on the latest kind of concentration on away from gaming here?
I'll come at it from a different perspective, which is I actually know Dayton, the founder of Faraway. I knew him way before I was into NFTs. And that company and those guys, I think it's in really good hands. I think what's going to be tricky for them because the heavy metal assets are still going to exist, those assets are going to exist. And I think that is a good group of guys that have been like a small team that really knows how to ship things all the time and keep improving and pivot when they have to. And Dayton is just, an incredible leader there. And they're young. So I'm excited, honestly, in a weird way on the other side of this whole thing, because everyone's talking about Yuga, but heavy metal and the other assets, that are acquired here. I'm more curious to see what these guys fucking do with it. And there's a chance they might just offload it, but I think for them it's like the biggest opportunity and the biggest audience that they've had after like years of grinding. And so I'm interested is it on that side. On the Yuga side, I mean, I think I echo like a lot of the thoughts that Thread Guy said, when he with his tweet, and I'm curious to see kind of what happens. But it's really cool to see Yuga Assets catching a bid today and people being interested. My boy Cyrus just accumulating mutants. It looks like, I don't know. That's an interesting one, but I'm honestly more. I think what this did, if I had to simplify it, is it makes people want to pay attention again. And now the question is like on both sides of this acquisition, what's the next thing that they do? Because I don't know if our space has the capacity to consume things that are too complicated.
Yes.
And so, what's the next thing basically is like the question, and how soon do they follow up with it? I don't think it's like a very long-term effect that this is going to have. People are going to move on from this topic tomorrow. When some Binance, like this new Binance launch pool thing, the halvings tomorrow, runes, like people are going to move on. This is like just that pre-Bitcoin halving, type of Twitter spaces, I think.
Yeah, I think it's an awesome take. And thanks for the perspective, thinking about it from the other side. Like the other side of this deal is a super amazing thing for Faraway, right? Like that's really cool for them to have this opportunity to take that IP and build something bigger on it. One follow-up question for you, Frank, before maybe we'll come back to NFT stats here, is what does the focus on the club like actually mean at the moment? What are your thoughts there? Because I know you're like obviously very in tune with what people want as part of like maybe this digital club where people want to kind of congregate around. Like, what's your thinking there?
I think it starts with attention, and like how do they just manage to foster more attention, not just for themselves as a project, but also for the people in their community. And I don't think it's much. I think any deeper than that. You start to mid curve it, because what is the advantage that new projects today have? Like they're just in the present moment. Just like a lot of people in this space are right now. I joke that I say on this is the default settings on Photon or any of these meme coin trading platforms is 1 minute, and so people's attention spans, quite literally, and for good financial reason, are extremely tight. Today, like the space is more volatile. We don't know if the market's going to tip or not. and things are just going minute by minute. So I want to give you like a specific answer, but I almost feel like if Yuga came out and said, this is what it means to be in a club, and this is like, you know, the 5 things that we're going to do that, and this is going to take us, you know, 6 months to go do, I actually think that they erase this kind of momentum that they have right now. So like, look at Yuga over the last few days, and they are catching a bid. You had the Yoga Apes drama, so like everyone on the timeline is talking about it. What happens then? They didn't go down, you know, like they went up like a little bit, just a little bit. There's a little bit of momentum there, and now obviously you have this Faraway thing. It's like, oh, a little bit more momentum, and then the industry and this is just how the space works. People go like make narratives and stories around that, and so when people ask what's the definition of mid curving something, I think it's when you try to like you try to like over explain the thing, or you try to create the narrative versus letting the narrative happen. And I think it's hard to force it. And I think that's always been Yuga's problem. And I don't have any problem saying that, you know, even in public, is that they're trying to weave together like an intricate kind of story here. But I don't know if that's going to catch any more attention than this kind of emergent stuff that's been happening even just over the last few days, or whenever people start talking about Yuga again. It's like, oh, you know, that's I think when they can capitalize on that attention. But other than that, you go to their profile, you know, and go to a lot of NFT projects. Azuki announced the fucking blockchain, guys. Like, who's talking about that? You know, like right now. And people are talking about runes. People are talking about Bitcoin. Why? Because tomorrow's the halving. And then after that, people are going to talk about, you know, when Blast starts coming up, you can kind of predict this. Like, as a Blast token starts getting closer and closer to launch, people are going to start pre-hyping that. And then they're going to go talk about that. And so these rotations, because there's not a lot of new buyers in the space, I think are kind of telegraphed. And it's hard for anybody to fight that IMO. So they got to just keep going, build the momentum from here.
Really, really interesting. One of the key takeaways from what you just said for me was that, you know, the idea that there needs to be a plan, or the discussion of whether there actually needs to be like a concrete 5-stage plan, and whether that's even worth communicating. And I guess that kind of leans into the mystique we often like from NFT founders. Sometimes are communicating or over communicating can be too much. Equally, sometimes under communicating is not received well, but there needs to be some level of excitement. I guess you got to find the balance there. Sam, I know you want to come in to maybe respond.
Can I go? I think it's even more radical than that though, man. I think it's not, it's actually like when you think about what does it mean to hold like a Bored Ape today, it means you got a lot of free money, you know, printed for you at some point in time, and this created an affinity towards that brand. But look at the NFT, just study the NFTs that are doing well today. You have Puppets, Node Monks, Miladies, Remilios. Like this is basically the 4 over the last month and a half that have been on absolute tears. And well, I think all of those projects have a very similar ethos, which is there's almost no execution risk. Like there's none. You know, what is like fucking the founder of Puppets going to tweet tomorrow that's going to like nuke their floor? Nothing. You know, there's like this element of there's no execution risk. And the holders of these projects, they adopt this kind of meme coin mentality of, you know, go work for your own bags. And so I think when you look at Miladies, like it's crazy to me how many new dApps and protocols and all these different things, like the founders,
they keep
or the people that work
them,
there. Yeah, no, not even the airdrop. I'm not even talking about that. I'm talking about like the builders. The builders are rocking the Miladies and the Remilios today. And that's like signal almost. Like I see that, you know, I'm like, oh, interesting. Like that's cool. And I think there was a time where that was apes. But if you've created this culture, and you know, we go through this as well too. And this is something I'm working on correcting, is like you go through this culture where the entire MO or the vibe, you know, of the project is just getting handouts and ultimately like doing nothing, then you cannot be mad when that is how everybody perceives you. That's all I'm saying. You can't be mad if that's like, you know, so there's certain projects today, not naming names, their entire MO is like, all right, we're getting airdrops. Well, one day when that dries up, just like it did for Bored Apes, they got a fuck ton of airdrops, they got a bunch of whitelists. When it dries up, if that is the community that you're left with, then we see how that's played out. Compare that again to Miladies. Like, look at how strong that fucking community is, dude. And there is no execution risk. Like, what is Charlotte Fang got hacked and got dumped like 100 fucking Miladies on the floor. And you know what everyone in the community was tweeting? They're like, distribution event. This is the best thing to ever happen. Like, we're even more anti-fragile. Like, study that. There's lessons in that. So I think that, yeah, people are maybe misinterpreting where, you know, issues are. And they think that if Yuga just executed on everything in X, Y, or Z way, all of a sudden there's going to be buyers. And I just ask people to look in the mirror and ask, like, oh, if Yuga did this thing really well, is that really what everyone's going to go buy on? Or like, where are these buyers coming from?
Yeah. Interesting take. Yeah. Really appreciate it, man. Really interesting stuff there. Sam, I know you wanted to come in on that directly. Then I've got a thought based on something that Frank said as well, but I'll come to you first.
Yeah, a few things. I do think it's funny that that we say like that Milady is absolutely on fire, and that means that they've gone from 3.5 to 4.5 ETH. Like in this environment, that's what we call an
NFT world,
absolute rally.
I'm just saying
because ETH
relatively.
NFTs are
Yeah,
just such a
yeah.
mess. But no, I think that broad point that Frank is making, like, there's nothing that people say they want more and actually want less than projects to do something. You know, if you look at like when DeGods were incredibly strong ahead of season 3, then season 3 happens, like, oh, we don't like it, and you're done forever. You know, Azuki incredibly strong ahead of Vegas, and then no one liked Vegas, and it's done forever. Everyone was so pumped about Bored Apes until Other Deed, and then that was the peak. Like the reason that the Bored Ape Yacht Club did well in the beginning was because there was tons of mystery and anticipation. There was always something to look forward to. They had a roadmap that was super interesting but entirely mysterious, so everyone's sitting there trying to understand what the roadmap actually is. What could it mean? What's the trial of Jimmy the Monkey? Like, and I think that, like, when people say do something, they never mean that. That's not actually what people want. I think the idea that like the alpha is have nothing planned and promise nothing, I take a little bit of odds with that, because the vast majority of projects that do that end up going to zero either quickly or slowly. Like at the end of the day, it actually doesn't work. But, in this moment, like the very few things that are doing well, maybe that's a thread that unites them. So I don't know. I think it's very hard to build a project that does absolutely nothing and promises nothing and does really well. But that's just kind of a separate thought.
Really interesting stuff. I think we're concluding the discussion on the Bored Ape stuff. One final thought for me, hearing what Frank was sharing, is it reminded me of that meme where it's like, difficult times create strong men create good times create weak men create, like, I can't remember the final thing, but it's like maybe there's like an arc for NFT cycle or NFT communities where like you're on the rise at one point, you've got a community that's really strong, and then you get complacent and arrogant and something, and you stop. Frank's phrase was working for your bags, because everything's being given to you. It might feel like for a period of time, then you get weaker and you get complacent potentially. That was just something that I thought. I don't know if that's right or wrong, just a reflection on what Frank was saying. But we're gonna park that there, because I think we want to get to the Binance news, which I think is absolutely huge as well. We're going to do the Web3 roundup to get you up to speed with everything else that's been happening in the space in the past 24 hours too. But just a reminder, if you're new here, we do this every single day, Monday to Friday, 7 a.m. Eastern time, live. We're live on X, we're live on YouTube. If you haven't seen the YouTube feed right here, right now, we've got me and NFT Stats chilling in Dubai. Pretty cool setup in my opinion, so you might want to check that out as well. We're live on X video too if you want to check it out over there. But let's get to the Web3 roundup, as always, from the snapshot, which is pinned up top. Let's do it. Here's some other news from the past 24 hours. We've got Memeland sweeping 21 R6 for the upcoming Rune coin drop. We covered that yesterday. Very cool from Memeland. Number 2, the Promethean's ordinal airdrop by Cyberkongs started trading at around 0.03 Bitcoin, which is pretty significant. There's 20,000 of those or so airdropped to various ordinal communities. I checked my wallets and I got none. So not very happy there, but good for the people who got them. NFT trader Cyrus picked up 20 mutant apes in the last couple of days, calling the bottom on those assets. Apple CEO Tim Cook, I like this piece of news, tags Azuki PFP in a post on Singapore. I thought it was pretty cool that the person that he tagged was a really cool photographer who was rocking an NFT profile picture. That was pretty cool to see. Next, Arthur Hayes becomes advisor to Drift, DEX on Solana. Jack Butcher Oviator sunglasses claim has gone live, and Coldy releases a Michael Saylor ordinal for $21. That's the roundup from everything else in the space. We want to try to get to this Binance news. I'm going to set it up for us, and then we're going to go to Sammy first to hear some thoughts. So this is the news. We've got Binance announcing Megadrop, a token launch platform with airdrops and Web3 quests. Binance will be the first platform to list the token. Oh, that's not the right bit. Binance is launching Binance Megadrop, a new token launch platform with airdrops and Web3 quests, where users can subscribe BNB to locked products and or complete tasks in their Web3 wallet for early access to rewards from selected Web3 projects before their tokens are listed on the Binance exchange. The first project to be introduced on Binance Megadrop will be Bounce, a BTC restaking chain. Absolutely going for the home run here. hitting on the BTC narrative at the moment, which is obviously pretty strong. Restaking on Bitcoin. I've never heard of that before. I don't know if it even makes any sense, but I'm big on ETH restaking, so I'm bullish on Bitcoin restaking. That's my instinct. Sammy, what are your thoughts here on Bitcoin restaking, but also this plan from Binance? We've noticed a bunch of people kind of aiming for this Launchpad kind of business model. What's your thoughts here? I'd love to go to NFT Stats 2 for his perspective in a second.
Yeah, I think the value in a launchpad is effectively the network. If you've got the infrastructure that you can build out to then distribute it to various people, I think that's pretty important. So you have all these launchpads that are being launched, but excuse the pun, but I think like a lot of those will fall by the wayside because there does seem to be to a penny. I know Mockerlist did one recently with CoinList,
yep.
And there's a few others that have popped up. But I think with Binance, I think the BNB token, if you look at it, it's actually held up pretty well. I don't know if it's on the back of this news, it's just kind of countered the market, but I think it's like 80 something billion market cap. Like it's pretty solidly in the top 10, top 5 tokens. So yeah, I don't know. It could be an interesting play, especially with this BTC restaking. It's something that's new, and I think if you're pushing the boundaries of some sort of innovation, then it's risky, but it could pay off big time. So it'd be interesting to see how it plays out. I don't know the intricacies of this first project that they're launching, but
sure,
I'm assuming if you go with the likes of if you look at Stakeland, for instance, pushing the runes recently, it's an interesting play. So maybe pushing through the Bitcoin narrative is smart, especially if you have more liquidity coming through. So.
Okay, interesting stuff. I've got three, or I think it's a 3-pronged question. Let's see how many prongs there are as I ask them for NFT Stats here. The first question is about this kind of launchpad model. Like, what do you think about it? Second question is maybe about meme land. Like, is this kind of in competition with what you guys are planning with Stakeland? Would be interesting to hear that. And the third question is actually more to do. Sammy mentioned like BNB holding up very well, and I made a post the other day saying BNB is doing great, like absolutely great, but we never hear about it on our timelines. And my question there is like, do you notice something where there's like an East versus West communication, like black hole, where there are certain things that are going on that are awesome in the East, we just don't talk about it as much, and there's certain things in the West that we talk about more, and there's just like this miscommunication or lack of communication on certain things. BNB's done awesome, but no one talks about it on our side of the world. What are your thoughts there? Because I know you were based out in Hong Kong for a long time, obviously working with Memeland now too. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
So many questions.
Was that 4-pronged or 3-pronged? I think it was 3.
And I'm hearing you in my headphones as well as in your voice. So I heard it like 8 questions now. No, but those are all like questions. I'm not even sure which one to address because I think they're all interesting. I mean, one thing that I certainly notice is the world of Binance traders is just a different world. I don't think it's so much East versus West because a lot of our followers and a lot of the people who care a lot about NFTs are based in Asia. I think it's kind of a bit more like a retail trading world versus versus kind of the world that we occupy. I think the big picture right now is that a lot of tokens are just printing for multi-billion-dollar market caps. Like, we saw Portal. I mean, Memecoin did it. We've seen a lot of different tokens that have kind of. And when that happened, this is the nature of cycles. When you see people making a lot of money, a lot of people want to get that. And then the result is that supply becomes too big and there's not enough liquidity to go around. And then things crash and then things crash. And, out of that come a couple winners. People start noticing winners. They start building up supply and, things rally. And then the supply gets too big and things crash again. Like that's the definition of a cycle is people responding to where the money is and then building capacity and then it getting overwhelmed. So I think right now we are in the point in the cycle where people are seeing a ton of money being made and want to insert themselves into those conversations, into those businesses simply as much as possible. As far as like, is this competition for Memeland? They did use the word quests, which is, I think, a pretty unique word that Memeland uses. I think, obviously our two companies know each other quite well. We're a much smaller company. But one thing I will say is right now there's so many projects that want these kind of services that like perhaps it's a competitive product, but I just think like we can't even keep up with the Telegram inbound that we have for projects that want to use the services that we provide. So it's I don't know. I don't think we're about to go into a drought if more players enter the space.
That's really interesting. I completely agree. I think it's such big business right now. It also made me think of Mockaverse and what they are building. Sammy, you might be able to speak to that a little bit. I know not necessarily all of those details may be public, and you might not be able to share everything, but it was making me think about the way Mockaverse has all this kind of universe of partners and how they're kind of driving attention to this universe, this Mockaverse universe of people. Is that something that you're seeing as through the work you've done with Mockaverse? Is that something that you expect them to be in the game for as well?
Yeah, I mean, they've got, well, they say they've got 450 portfolio companies, but there's probably a lot more. You'll see a lot of recent investments. So I think having that network is extremely valuable. I think having the Mockalist partnership with CoinList recently, now they've done billions in token launches. So if you think about all the individual portfolio companies that could be looking to launch a token at some point, it's likely that they're going to go through this Mockalist route. And then obviously if you've got Mocha NFTs, which are supposed to be the 8,888 co-founders, I think that value is going to be driven to that. So even post Mocha token launch, I think there's a huge potential value accrual to those individual holders and also those that participate with the Mocha IDs. So you would have seen recently they had like a Realm Network post. So it's becoming this big social decentralized identity that they're bringing on chain. And essentially you accrue value based on your interactions on chain. Now I think they've raised significant sums, about 32 million. And I think if you compare that to Memeland, they're obviously well capitalized. Binance, extremely well capitalized. So I think there are launchpads that are coming through that could have a lot of value, and ultimately it's from their network and the infrastructure that they provide. So I think Mockaverse is up there, certainly.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I appreciate those perspectives. I definitely think, I mean, I've noticed this trend for a while now, ever since I learned more about Seedify actually and their kind of business model and how I believe they were kind of printing basically for not just themselves, but also their holders who are participating in these kind of, I don't know what you'd call them, like were they IDOs or just these kind of launches, helping projects come to market. I definitely think because of where we are in the market, the risk profile for a lot of people is that they do want to participate, they want to be involved, they want to pre-buy these tokens, they want to see them go to market. And so yeah, a lot of demand from that and a lot of people trying to service that demand. And my interesting observation, again, I know Sam said it's not necessarily an East v West thing, is that I noticed a lot of the good stuff's coming from the East, or a lot of people trying to service that demand. That's where it's coming from. So that's just an interesting observation, which I'm kind of looking at always, despite the fact we operate in a very global marketplace. I still actually try to break down things geographically sometimes because I think practically it's always been relevant. And just because we're not like being super vocal about where we are, it's always, it seems to still be a factor sometimes. So I always try to keep that in mind. But guys, we have run out of time for today's show. Just a reminder that we do this every single day, Monday to Friday, 7 a.m. Eastern time. We go live. We go live on X in this space that you might be sitting in. We go live on X video as well. Go follow the Modern Market Twitter account. And we're also live on YouTube too. Modern Market over there. Please do subscribe if you enjoy the stuff there. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you to my co-host Sammy, as always. Thank you to my other co-host NFT Stats, who has just left the room, but we're going to be hanging out in Dubai now. If anyone else is here, hit us up. Maybe we can hang. And thank you so much for those in the audience. Thanks so much for joining us. Have a wonderful day. Take care, and we will see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.